talking about golf this week. So do you know what you're supposed to do on a golf course if you're afraid of being hit by lightning? You hold up a 2-iron because not even God can hit that. Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dollar-Coltman, joined by Elliot Tanti. Braden Dollar-Coltman is with us as well. We are going to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. We now know who the final two teams will be fighting it out for the Cup. We are going to talk about golf and the new, it's no longer a Cold War. It is a full-on war between two rival organizations, the fledgling one and the old one. So we will talk about golf, and then we're going to play a fun little game. We haven't played a game in a while. We're going to play a fun little game called You Can Only Keep One in our third block, and it'll be a little bit of Oilers off-season talk for all of our Oiler fans out there, so stick around for that one. Before we get going, Elliot, the CFL kicked off this week. I know that you are one of our longest CFL patrons, whether your fandom has shifted over the years or not. Regardless of that, I know it's a lineage in the family, season ticket holders in Edmonton. Will you be going down to the Brickfield at Commonwealth this year? Are you excited that the CFL is back, or how did that sort of strike you? This isn't a full topic, so we'll keep it brief, but I want to know.
Well, it doesn't look like they're very good. So that's one of the things that I'm worried about. They gave up 59 points to BC yesterday. So that will certainly impact my decision a little bit. You know what? I haven't been out to an Elks game in quite a while, and I was thinking this year it might be a good year to do it. I, just like everyone else in Edmonton, it's like a walk-up town. I'm a walk-up person. If it's 23 degrees and sunny and a beautiful July night and I've got nothing to do and someone to go with, I may go, but no active plans right now.
Well, Braden, if you pass your schedule along to Elliot and you both are free on the same night, there you go. He may have someone to go with.
Yeah, but I might encourage him to come see the Portland Pickles down at Telus Field.
Remax Field.
No, I think it's been. Oh, no, yeah, no, it's not Remax, right? Yeah, right.
It's been a while there too. Well, look at that. Lots of summer sports kicking off. We will talk about some of those down the road, but we have a few pressing things to deal with first. Let's get to it. Here's topic one. So the hockey season has all come down to this. It is the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning. You heard that right. The Tampa Bay Lightning, back for their third straight Stanley Cup final appearance. They have an opportunity to become immortal, be the first team in this century, and frankly, the first team since the New York Islanders in the 80s to be a three-peat winning Stanley Cup champion organization. That would be fantastic for them. It would be, obviously, they were fourth as a team. They won early 2000s, but for this group, 3 in a row, that is a hell of a feat, Elliot. New York gave them a couple early headaches there, Shesterkin specifically. I think if we look back over the course of the entire playoffs, the two biggest goalie stories have to be Jake Ottinger and Shesterkin. Obviously, Shesterkin, I think, a shoe-in to win the Vezina at this point for what his regular season was, carrying a subpar New York Rangers team who had some firepower at some points, but really just a phenomenal performance from him. However, it's the first ballot Hall of Fame goaltender in Andrei Vasilevsky, who's now carrying his team to the finals. Will we see a three-peat? Is Tampa Bay just destined for something special here, Elliot, or does Colorado have enough firepower to slow them down?
Man, it's tough to bet against Tampa Bay. Hey, I mean, it feels like every series since this playoff started, I've picked the other guy, and they have won every series, and in some ways kind of handily. I mean, they did give up the first 2 games to New York, but then came home and won the next 2, and then won the next 4 straight. I think Vasilevsky is taking them, carrying them at this point. However, maybe that's not even right. Like, there's just a group of people. You can never discount the winners. If you've won a championship, it means so much. And the majority of people on those have won 2. Patrick Maroon's won 3. That being said, having watched Colorado directly against the Oilers, that team is very good. The question that I have is sort of, where's Colorado injuries are at? You know, they're playing their backup goalie. Cogliano was hurt. Kadri's gone in for surgery, might be coming back. You know, that would be the question going in for me. But I guess you give Colorado a slight favorite, but maybe not because of the injuries. I think this is going to be a close series.
All right. I'm going to give you two storylines, Braden. You get to pick which one you think is more compelling. Okay. You have Nathan McKinnon and Rantanen and maybe Darcy Kemper, if not the other guy who's been just as good. I'm not saying his name because I don't remember it.
Francouz.
There you go. See? The other guy.
You will remember it.
But more specifically, just an unbelievable run from Cale Makar. So you have that storyline. The upstarts, guys who haven't got there yet, but have all the talent and potential in the world, have come up so close and so short. For some of them, it's been a long time. Gabriel Landeskog's been there a long time. Or you have the chance at a three-peat. As I mentioned off the top, you've got only the Islanders are the last team to do it. And then everyone else who ever did it is named either the Montreal Canadiens or the Toronto Maple Leafs. And they did it when they were 7 teams. So this is the hardest league there is to have a three-peat. At least history would suggest that. Of those two storylines, I'm not asking you which one you think will win. I'm asking you which one your heart wants to win. Which of those two stories is more compelling?
Well, that's an interesting. Yeah, okay. Well, I think the three-peat is more compelling. I think that's a really, really exciting thing when you talk about dynasty, when you talk about your cementing legacy of Andrei Vasilevsky and what they were able to accomplish. I really do like, I mean, you didn't ask me which one I prefer. I do prefer the Colorado team in this series. I think that the Makar story alone is something to behold. Like the numbers he's putting up in his sophomore season is beyond imaginable. But yeah, I think this storyline around Pat Maroon being, Elliot mentioned it, Pat Maroon being to the finals. This is his 4th time. There's one interesting kind of narrative here that I've been enjoying, and that's that Corey Perry's now back in the finals for the 3rd time and having lost the last 2. So there's an interesting thing here of, is he going to be yet again the jinx?
So you mentioned the Corey Perry thing, which I think is great because it's true. Corey Perry now 3rd final in a row with his 3rd different team, right? He went with Dallas, lost to Tampa Bay. He went with Montreal, lost to Tampa Bay. What are you going to do if you can't beat him? Join him, right? He joins Tampa Bay this year. It feels very reminiscent of the Marian Hossa situation a few years ago, right? He played against, I believe he played for Pittsburgh and lost to Detroit. Then he went and played for Detroit, lost to Pittsburgh, finally won one in Chicago. But the other one is Patrick Maroon, right? I think you mentioned him briefly, but Patrick Maroon has now been a part of 15 straight series victories in the playoffs. And he has a chance to win his 4th Stanley Cup in a row, which is insane. That's a great statistic just as an individual player. Yeah. And for a guy like Patrick Maroon, who's not, the leader on that team offensively, not going to be the flashiest big, but a guy who's worked hard, got where he is, and has found immense success. And if he's the magic missing piece that got Tampa there in the first place, look at that. He's got them now to 3 finals in a row. If they can win it, it'll be 4. I agree with Elliot. It's really hard to bet against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but if there was ever a team that I think was built the right way to compete with the firepower and the defensive and goaltending capabilities of the Tampa Bay Lightning, it is Colorado. They have such offensive potential. They have so many different weapons. They attack you in different ways. We obviously saw that as the Oilers. Even the Oilers' firepower couldn't contend with just the barrage that comes the other way. The only weakness that I think Colorado still has, and I do think that it was one the Oilers were unable to truly exploit, was the goaltending. When lit up, we saw the vulnerability of that goaltending on both game 1 and in game 4 when the Oilers had them on the ropes. There's an opportunity for Tampa Bay to just overpower them. But I would also say, to give Colorado a little bit of credit, they have also been able to push back against teams that have been that competitive. They've only lost twice this entire playoffs. That is saying something about that team as a whole. I think it's a great final. I think it's the correct final as far as the 2 best teams are here right now. Maybe not the 2 best teams coming out of the regular season, because Florida probably would have arguably been the better team, but Tampa Bay beat them, and that shows you they were better. So I think it's exciting. It would have been fun to have New York there, but I don't think New York I just don't think New York was as good a team. It was a great story for them to be there, but this is the better one. Elliot, let me round this topic out like this. We're gonna do our picks in a second. But if you had to pick like a dark horse on either one of these teams to be the hero or a guy who would come, not the Cale Makars, not the Nathan McKinnons, when you've watched Colorado, who's the guy on Colorado that's sort of the underrated guy or the unsung hero, and then who's the guy conversely on Tampa Bay that you would look for?
I really enjoyed and have been following the play of Devin Taves for Colorado. He kind of gets he not spoken of too much because, he plays with Cale Makar, I think, a lot of the time. And so he's sort of the guy in the back end. But he plays a really rugged, tough defensive game. He does get a lot of secondary assists. I think that's the kind of player that could make a show or do something kind of unique in that space. And Tampa Bay, I mean, how could you not take Patrick Maroon? I mean, like that guy, he's just a champion. My question to you guys, and maybe this is ludicrous, I was sort of feeling like he was maybe on the fence for the Hall of Fame coming into this year, given the last 3 years that he's had.
Mr. Maroon?
Yeah, if he goes and wins a 4th championship with a second team, is this debatable? Like, are we having that conversation?
No, I think there's lots of guys who have multiple cups that haven't made it or made the impact.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think Stanley Cups are like often they're like the deciding factor on a really good statistical player who may or may not have got there. I'm thinking of a guy like Jarome Iginla. It's like the only thing missing from Jarome Iginla's resume is a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, but Iggy will make it.
He did make it. He's in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
But my point being so in that case, the Stanley Cup doesn't matter. I don't think the Stanley Cup carries the same weight on its own. But that like he doesn't have any other individual awards. I don't know if he's ever been an all-star. I don't think he's ever won a scoring title or been close to competing in any statistical titles. Maybe that's a factor. I don't know. It's a good question though. And he certainly is up there on the list of like most Stanley Cups by players. So that's a good question, Elliot. I guess the other question I think you could ask is how many members of this Tampa Bay Lightning are destined for the Hall of Fame? I mean, there's at least 3 or 4 guaranteed. I mean, like I said, Vasilevsky's a lock. He's the best goalie of his generation. Victor Hedman is probably there. Stamkos is definitely there. Kucherov is on his way to being there. If he can have he's still early enough in his career that it could go sideways. But if he continues at the pace he's on, that's at least 4 I can think of off the top of my head. And now you could argue, I know he hasn't been here long, but Corey Perry's if he wins a Stanley Cup, he's got everything else. That's at least 5 guys, right? I mean, that's Edmonton Oilers in the 80s. Good to have 5 guys off one roster. That's a heck of a number. You add Patrick Maroon to that's 6. I think Patrick Maroon's a real long shot for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I never saw him. I don't know about that. I haven't seen him in the Hall of Fame.
But a playoff forward, right? That's the weird thing about it. It's like I'm just looking at the season stats, and he's like, but half-point player per game. But he's impact. I mean, he scored a huge goal in this series again too. Like he just does it in the playoffs, and I don't know. I think there's a question there, particularly this streak of 4 cups in 4 years. If that's where they go, that's insane.
It's something. Braden, I'll go to you first for our pick. So who do you have and in how many games?
I got Cale Makar in 5 games.
Okay.
And I think we're going to remember Pavel Francouz's name. I think that Francouz might get a look in this series and he'll there was something about his right-handedness that just he was surprising. He was really surprising. And he's a good goalie. So I think Colorado's going to take this in 5.
All right, Elliot.
Just because I want to see it, let's go Tampa Bay in 7, and they take the 3-peat.
Very nice. I will also take Tampa Bay. I think it's 6 games. Yeah, I'll go with 6. I'll take Tampa as well. So Braden, you're the only one taking the Colorado Avalanche at this point. So you are the only one with a chance to really win this outright. Those are our picks. That is topic 1.
Do you like fast cars? Do you like when they race? Whether you're a seasoned Formula One fan or you've just discovered the rush of racing, check out the Pit Stop Podcast presented by the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Join Jordan, Tyler, and Braden each week as they recap every race as well as break down the biggest stories on and off the track all before setting you up for the next race in the Formula One schedule. The Pit Stop Podcast is available anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right, so a very big weekend in the world of golf this weekend. We had obviously the Canadian Open, which is kind of one of the smaller tournaments in the PGA calendar. Obviously, I don't mean to take anything away from Canada and RBC and all of the sponsors involved with it, but it is not one of the bigger or more cared about tournaments. However, this weekend, it really did have a much more prominent role as it was competing against the very first ever tournament by upstart rival golf league, the LIV Golf League. I guess I'm not sure if it's live or live or LIV,
it's a
Roman numeral.
It's for 54, a reference to the Roman numeral.
Got it.
54,
which makes sense because it's only a 3-round golf tournament and only 54 holes played instead of the traditional 72. Thank you, Braden. That's very educational.
Yeah. Cool.
So there you go. The big storyline, however, about this was the basic abdication of several major PGA stars leaving the PGA to go compete with this rival organization for ridiculous sums of money. But in doing so, they were informed that they were forfeiting their PGA Tour cards and basically turning their back on what has been the only major golf league event in the world for the history of golf here. And here's the big thing about how this played out. So they had their first event. It was on ESPN. It did get a little bit of fanfare. Definitely very different in presentation and style to the PGA. They are trying to be young and hip and new and interested in gambling and all of this kind of stuff. Shotgun start, meaning for those who aren't familiar with golf, rather than the traditional start at the PGA where you would have a staggered start and everyone would start on the same hole and slowly move their way through the course. There's basically a threesome on every single tee box around the course, starting at the same time, playing on like a rotation. So you might start on 18, you might start on 16, and then you play the 18 the rest of the way around. It allows for the tournament to be faster. It allows for the tournament to be simultaneous, I guess, from the beginning of it. And it's just a different thing. We also saw, obviously, as Braden mentioned, only 52 holes. So it was only 3 days. And we also saw this brand new, very different look as far as team play. So every golfer golfing individually was drafted by a captain to one of 12 teams to start the tournament. So there were 3-man teams, and you didn't compete, you didn't necessarily compete next to your teammates, but over the course of the day, your scores were aggregated and the top 2 scores counted towards team points, kind of like the Formula One structure. So at the end of the tournament, there were not only individuals who were winning, but the teams themselves got the top 3 teams also got money from an additional pot. The big piece about this is the money. We cannot talk about this without acknowledging that this is funded by the Saudi government, the Saudi kingdom, and that the numbers are absolutely staggering. So I wanted to lead with this before I jump in with the guys. Dustin Johnson made more money this weekend just by joining this tournament. His signing bonus from the organization to join was $125 million. To put that into perspective, from August 27, 1996 to the present, Tiger Woods, the unequivocal greatest golfer of his generation, his entire total winnings from the PGA, including more majors than anybody else who he competed with as a contemporary, is $120,895,000. In one day, Dustin Johnson made $5 million more than the entirety of Tiger Woods' professional golf career. That is insane. The winner of the tournament this weekend, Charles Schwartzel, made more money in a winning purse than any golfer has ever made at a single tournament in the history of golf. So I'll ask you this, Elliot. Are these golfers insane to be going to compete with this? Or are they just going and following the money?
Well, they can be both, right? Like they can be
fair enough,
and also follow the money.
I think they are.
They are insane. I think optically it looks really bad. I mean, Dustin Johnson lost his sponsorship with RBC this week because he decided to play in this tournament.
I don't think they were paying him $125 million.
No, absolutely. But the exposure associated with that kind of a sponsorship and what that that has meant for him. Yeah, his commercials all over all of golf in Canada. He is sort of the So anyway, that's lucrative. So it goes to show you just sort of how much money's invested in this thing. Exactly. Right. Just to follow your point. I think the optics of playing in these tournaments are really bad. I think Saudi Arabia's got a horrific criminal or, human
criminal. Yep. Criminal.
And their leader is, literally murdered and dismembered a journalist that he didn't like what he was being said. Facilitated or protected by the then president of the United States at that time. Anyway, different show, different topic. So I think that there is significant problems with this. That being said, I do think PGA Tour needed a shakeup. I think it needed to feel a little bit challenged, and hopefully this leads to some reforms that make their game better. I love the shotgun start. I think watching a full day of golf versus 4 hours of golf is actually a lot better. I think that there's, leaning into the betting stuff is good. I still prefer 4 rounds to 3, but I understand what they're doing. I just think, this is probably the kind of competition the PGA Tour needs to do something better. But I think it's a poor choice by the players, and I will think less of the players that are participating because they've made the decision to play in this. So,
Braden, I'll come to you with this here. So obviously the PGA Tour were pretty adamant in their response to this. They came out pretty quickly to denounce all these players leaving and threaten any future players who think about leaving. And then throughout the entire broadcast of the final round of the weekend rounds, frankly, the entire weekend rounds of the RBC Canadian Open, both Jim Nantz and the rest of the commentary team across the board made constant remarks regarding just the quality of the golf at the PGA level compared to the sideshow that they considered this other thing. They've really clearly at the PGA level, they are fully aware of the threat that they face, and they are pushing back hard. Where do you come down on the PGA's response? Do you think does the PGA come out looking better or worse for how they have responded to this situation, Braden?
Well, to be clear, they've suspended any player who has left the tour, and they have
suspended their tour cards. Correct.
Right. Indefinitely, I take it.
Indefinitely, yeah. I think they would have to apply to return.
Which they wouldn't. Yeah. It's like it's very transparent what this is and why these players left. The money is ridiculous, and it's very clear too that Saudi Arabia doesn't care to make a profit on this. I think that it's about exposure and getting the golf happening in other countries in other ways, but it's also about, I think, like Saudi trying to make themselves look better on a global stage when you've got these professionals that people care about and they want to watch play golf. And I don't think it's prevented anyone who watches the PGA from watching this tournament either. I mean, I haven't, because I don't watch a lot of golf, but I would be curious to see what the viewership has been like. I mean, if it wasn't like you guys had mentioned, with everything that's happening and happened in Saudi Arabia, and with the dictator that's behind everything that's happening there, I think that this would be a really, really important and good thing for the PGA to have another kind of competitive thing happening for golf and for just exposure globally that's much, much more than just what the PGA provides. But there is a dilemma there with it's a problem. It's for sure a problem.
So obviously, as I mentioned, the Canadian Open took place, Rory McIlroy winning it. I think for the PGA's perspective, that was great. They wanted one of their stars to be the star of the weekend. He had a very subtle jab at Greg Norman, who is the former PGA superstar, who is the executive running this other league now. He basically said, this is Rory McIlroy said, this will be a day I'll remember a long, long time. 21st PGA win, one more than someone else. That gave me a little bit of extra incentive today. Obviously, he's talking about 20-time PGA Tour winner Greg Norman. So this is clearly something they are all talking about. They're all aware of. Everybody in the PGA who has chosen to stay fully aware of the decisions they're making. I'm sure there are dozens of them who had very difficult decisions to make between the financial implications of going to this other league, choosing to do so, and not staying behind and competing in the traditional PGA Tour and all of the things associated with that. Here's my take on all of this. This reminds me of the XFL. And I don't mean in the sense that I expect the Saudi Arabia thing to fall apart. I don't mean that part of it. I mean at the beginning of the XFL, the first time. And what the XFL was a fundamental threat to the NFL's monopoly on their sport in America. It was the recognition that there was only one game in town. Nobody really competed with them. Nobody pushed them to innovate. No one pushed them to change. The XFL came in as this haphazard, kind of messy, kind of sloppy, almost reality TV style version of the sport. Was it lowbrow? Yes. Was it clumsy and not always very well organized? Yes. Did they make a lot of early mistakes? Yes. But what they did get right was that they threw out the rule book in a lot of different ways that challenged the competitor in the NFL to move forward in a lot of ways they weren't. I think this is my big take on this. I actually think that as much as the PGA views this as an existential threat to their brand and their business, it is very possible that this will be the best thing that has happened to them in the last decade. We've seen the sort of falling off of Tiger Mania. They don't have a single superstar. This is a sport that is driven by the brand power of individuals. They just don't have a charismatic superstar to fall back on, to brand themselves, market them beside. They tried Rory, didn't really work. They tried Dustin Johnson, didn't really work. They tried Jordan Spieth, didn't really work. All these different guys haven't really been able to pick up the torch the way Tiger did and carry it into the next thing. This is an opportunity to do that because now they have an enemy and they have a competitor that is doing something very different than what they're doing. It allows them to appear to be the more elevated version of the sport, and it gives them this foil. I also think there's an opportunity for them to let these other guys try things out, and if any of it works and catches on and fans like it, they can take it. The XFL is another good example. Where's the first league to ever try the Skycam? It's the XFL. They wanted their game to look like the video games. Every single NFL product you have seen in the last 2 decades has had cameras in the skies, cameras down in the field, a whole bunch of innovations just to the broadcast product that made the game better. But they would never have tried it if some wacky kind of crazy cousin out to the left tried it, and they did, and it worked. I think this is going to be good for golf in the long run. Do I agree with Elliot that there are huge problematic parts about the Saudi-backed part of this? Yes. Does it put a bit of a black mark on every one of the individuals who's chosen to go there? Yes. However, at the same time, we are talking about golf, the most elite and problematic sport in America, I think, historically, in terms of racism, in terms of money, in terms of opportunities for minorities and for women and for a whole bunch of different people to even participate at the introductory levels. Golf has always had these issues. Is this a different problem? Yes, it's a different problem. But the truth is, at the end of the day, there are Russian oligarchs owning professional soccer teams. The Saudi whatever the Saudi fund, whatever the term is for it, owns Newcastle United in the Premier League. They are everywhere. They have proliferated sport across the board. That is a conversation, as Elliot said, maybe for another day. It is a big conversation, but I think you do have to table that and look at this from a different perspective for a moment, which is this could be good for golf. That's my take. I'll give you guys a chance to respond or dig in. Any last thoughts on any of that, Elliot?
No, I think you're right. I think there is an opportunity for this to be really good for golf. I think if they've been set in their ways for so long, that, outside of hockey, they might be the most conservative league. And so, I hope you're right. I also think that how golf deals with this and the future of this situation is going to be really impactful, because I think we might start seeing other leagues start, forming to challenge the existing best leagues, if this works out for this group of Saudi investors.
Braden, any last thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at the success of, the KHL or the SHL, or there's leagues all over the world for hockey, and it only helps support the game and the exposure of it. There's absolutely a dilemma when it comes to the political ties to the league, but that's that's beyond the sport itself right now. And I think that there's definitely some upside with having some competition for the PGA.
And it is an evolving story we will come back to and see how it grows. That is topic 2. Do you or someone you know own a small business? Are you looking to grow or to reach new customers? Hey, why not let us help? Hattrick is looking for unique brands, businesses, and products to advertise on our show. You can find out how we can help spread the word about your business by contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. All right, topic 3. As I said, we're going to play a quick game. It's sort of each of us is going to pick a player of the 3 players that I'm going to bring up in a second. It's the off season for the Edmonton Oilers. There are some very big decisions that Ken Holland has to make and that the organization needs to make about some of their young talent who are on expiring deals. Obviously, there are bigger pieces we're not going to talk about today. Evander Kane, won't he be able to stay? Won't they be able to afford him? We're not going to talk about goaltending. We're not going to talk about any of those things. We're going to talk about 3 specific players who were all at different points in the season and in the playoffs, very valuable for the Oilers, very competitive for the Oilers, but I would also argue not controversial, but definitely like lightning rods for conversation for lots of different reasons, good, bad, ugly. Those are 3 players that I want to talk about because all 3 are in expiring contracts are Ryan McLeod, Jesse Puljujarvi, and Kyler Yamamoto. They are all very similar in age, young players under 25 and players who are clearly proven themselves to be NHL caliber players. The question is, if you can only keep one, who is it? I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm not saying the Oilers won't find a way to keep 2, maybe all 3, but if you can only keep one, who's it going to be? We've each taken one of those players to champion. I'm going to go to Elliot first. Elliot, I know that yours is very controversial for a lot of people. I want to know why you believe if we can only keep one, it has to be Jesse Puljujarvi.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really tricky, right? All 3 of these players are very good, and they're all very good at different things. And as you said, at different times throughout the season have been, impactful players. The reason why I think Jesse Puljujarvi is the way to go is that I think he has the highest upside of the 3 players. He is the biggest player, and that size does matter. And he has the potential to be a really meaningful, engaged power forward. And when he has played like that this year and in years previous, he's been immensely successful. When they've put him in front of the net in the power play, or when he's been fighting board battles down the side, he has been very successful. Where he lacks is a little bit in his skills and his skills coach, but that's what a skills coach is for. And what I like about Jesse Puljujarvi is that it seems like every time he's lacking at something, or there's something that he's not doing up to standard, he will get called out on it and by his coaches and his teammates, and then he corrects it and works to correct it. So playing physical, or being a big body, or not backing down in board battles. We saw that be an immense grow in his game this year, and it was incredibly impactful. He got a push to be more physical in the playoffs, and in the latter half of the series with Colorado, he was. Did he miss some big shots and some big opportunities to score? Absolutely. But he also scored in the playoffs too and proved he could compete in that level. And I think in terms of size and actual upside, also the fact that he's probably going to be the cheapest of the 3, and for a team that's really up against it from a cap standpoint, that might be something that's really valuable to the team as well too. That's why I think Jesse Puljujarvi is the one to go.
All right, Braden, you are taking Kyler Yamamoto. Tell me why we should keep Yamo.
Well, I think it's obvious. I think it's very clear that Yamo's got the most skill of these 3 RFAs. He put up a 41-point season with 20 goals and played all but 1 game this year. That's massive, and it showed. I mean, he was a really important impact player on the right side for like 3 different lines throughout the year. He could play on every single line there. The guys trust him. I think what makes Yamo, although he's undersized, there's such a fight in his play. I love what he does offensively. He keeps plays alive. His puck pressure is excellent. I mean, one counter to this is Yamo's now given reason for his asset value to be a lot higher than the other two players. I think McLeod also kind of is in that category. It's going to be harder to move a Puljujarvi as it would be probably with stats and the way that he's been playing. I think if the Oilers can keep Yamo, they should do everything that they can to make that happen.
All right. So I'm going to take Ryan McLeod, and I'm going to say three things. Number one, speed. He is the fastest of all three of these guys on a team that we criticized about 2 years ago for not being able to play at full tempo. We obviously have the fastest player in the world in Connor McDavid, but this team lacked the ability to be able to attack at speed. And whether he's playing with Connor, which we did see a couple times, but more importantly, when he is not, he's able to push and generate scoring opportunities with his feet more so than any other player on the roster outside of Connor. He's an incredibly explosive player. Number two, I think he has the most upside in terms of potential. Has he yet gotten to where Yamamoto has shown he's capable of it at the NHL level? No. But Ryan McLeod has come on so quickly and so fast in the last 2 years. Only played 71 games this year with the Oilers, started the season in Bakersfield, but when he came up, he made himself completely essential to what they were doing. He was able to drive a line as a centerman, make sure that he was getting better in the faceoff circle. We saw some big faceoff wins for him in game 4 of the what ended up being the deciding game for Colorado. But as a young player at only 22 years old, to be able to go into a playoff series and hold your own in a faceoff dot is important. This is what this team needs moving forward. I know that he holds more potential than what we've actually yet seen in terms of Yamo and Puljujarvi. I think that's just about opportunity. However, again, at 22 years old, to go in and play 16 playoff games, have 4 points, 3 goals, and an assist. And all 3 of those goals were important big game goals in moments when the Oilers needed them. He was able to show that he can play on the biggest stage. And the third thing I think is that when it comes to what the Oilers have lacked over the last few years too, is its genuine, homegrown, drafted, developed, and kept centerman. And that is something that is hard to get in this league. It's the only thing harder is goaltending, but to be able to actually develop and keep your own NHL quality centerman is hard to do. He is a true centerman. He is not. Kyler and Yessi are both wingers by the way they've always played. Ryan McLeod is a centerman, and I think that has to go into the column for him. That's my first pitch. I'm going to do this really quickly. Here's what we'll do. I'm going to give Elliot you a second to pick either Ryan McLeod or Yamamoto and give us the reason why you think Puljujarvi should stay instead of one or the other. And then I'll let the other person defend that. You've got 30 seconds. Go.
Well, I think that I would take Yessi over Kyler Yamamoto. And I think we've all sort of this, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think we've all agreed that Yamamoto's the most skilled, Ryan McLeod's the quickest, and Yessi's the biggest. And I think that
there's no question about that.
Yeah, he is. He's got a big boot.
And I think in today's modern NHL game, you need size to be able to compete. And while I do accept that Yamamoto had a good playoff start, he did fall away towards the end and was actually concussed and hurt. For the final game that the Oilers played. And I think that, he is not Martin St. Louis. And I think he's going to get he's injury prone. And I think he will continue to get banged up in the NHL. And for what you're going to have to pay him for that kind of liability, I think that's why Yessi is the better.
Oh my goodness.
So Braden, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. I think you have
30 seconds. Go.
There's absolutely no merit in anything that you just said. You said it's injury prone. He played 81 games this season. You said Jesse Puljujarvi had more upside in the playoffs. He had 5 points. He was absolutely pathetic in the playoffs this year, and he has been the last 2 years that we've been in the playoffs with Jesse Puljujarvi. Puljujarvi does some things off the puck well, yes, but I think he is much more of a liability on your team right now, trying to win a championship. And when you look at what he plays on right wing, we've got a guy coming up, Xavier Bourgault, we just drafted. He won't make the show next year, but he just won they just won the QMJHL on his back. Jesse is expendable right now, and I don't think that you try to hold on to him. I mean,
all right. All right, that's your 30 seconds.
That's
you did
it.
well. You did very well, Braden. I'm going to let you now take a shot at you kind of just took it at Puljujarvi, so I'm going to assume you're going to go after McLeod, but you can take another shot at Puljujarvi if you want. But tell me why you should keep Yamamoto specifically over one or the other of these two other players.
Well, I think you absolutely keep Ryan McLeod. I think it's Puljujarvi. I mean, if you can afford both McLeod and Yamo, I think that is an absolute upside for the Oilers moving forward. I think Jesse has to help this team moving forward. That's pretty much it. I mean, you've said everything that I agree with McLeod. He's fast, and what's cool about that is he makes it seem it seems like McDavid's on the ice, and I think it surprises players that all of a sudden see this burst of speed, and it's not McDavid. The MC on the back also helps confuse players, but I think Kyler Yamamoto and Ryan McLeod are the two guys that you try to hold on to with these RFAs.
So thank you. I'm not going to let Elliot respond to that because the two of you are basically going after each other. So let me jump in here for fun. Really quickly, though, two things. Number one, Jesse Puljujarvi played the least regular season minutes of any of these three players. Don't tell me he's not injury prone. Number two, Braden, you gave Jesse Puljujarvi 5 points in the playoffs. He had 3 points in the playoffs. He had 2 the previous year. He's got 5 total for the career.
Yeah.
That's not great. All right. Here's the thing, though. Ryan McLeod, the reason we're keeping Ryan McLeod is because of his speed, his centerman ability, and what he brings offensively. However, I have to side with Elliot in the sense that I do believe that size is still important on the wings. And I would argue that if you're keeping Ryan McLeod, you don't need Kyler Yamamoto. Kyler Yamamoto is a very, very talented player. And look, let's be honest. All three of us would love to keep all three of these guys. I think that's fair. I don't think
No. I don't want to keep Jesse Puljujarvi. I don't think that that's helpful for the team moving forward. I think that he did not show up in the playoffs at all.
I think yes. Okay, I'm not going to try to defend Elliot's player, but just for a sec, I do think Jesse Puljujarvi has a lot of physical traits he needs to grow into. He always looks a little bit like a deer on skates for me. He's always a little bit out of control. If he could get that whole body dialed in and play like a Ryan Getzlaf, like size wise, he'd be phenomenal. The thing I was trying to say though about Kyler Yamamoto is my issue with Yamamoto has nothing to do with his stats. He's a phenomenal player. Like he put up 41 points this year. He had a career year. He's going to be a superstar in this league. The challenge is that what the Oilers desperately need is a genuine winger who can play on the top line night in and night out. They need a Vander Kane. They need a player like that moving forward. And the challenge you have on this team is we have to look at it in two groups. You've got your top 6 and your bottom 6. Yamamoto, by all definitions, skill-wise, should be a top 6 player, but he's not a top 6 player on this current roster consistently enough. He hasn't been able to make it work. We were shuffling him around all year. So he's the piece that I think you need to find a replacement for more so than a centerman. And I'll go back to that point again. Centermen are the hardest thing to find. And that's why for me, McLeod has to stay. And if it's going to be Jesse or Yamo going, then it's one or the all Elliot,
like I said too, like Yamo's got the higher trade asset value right now. So that is something to consider.
All right, we're going to really quickly do our closing statements here, as this is a very formal and properly organized debate. So we're gonna do this in the reverse order. I made Elliot go first on his opening statement, so we'll give him the final word. I will go first. In closing, I believe that Ryan McLeod is the one of these 3 players that you must keep, because I think that in the end, when the Edmonton Oilers find themselves back in the Western Conference Finals next year, and they find themselves in a deciding game in overtime, and there is a face-off in their own zone, you want a centerman you can count on to go back there and win that face-off. And of all of the young players coming up for the Edmonton Oilers, and certainly all 3 of these guys here, I feel more confident knowing that Ryan McLeod is back there taking that face-off than any of the other 2 here or any other young centerman we have in the system. Ryan McLeod, to me, has the most upside. I have never seen a player come out of the minor league and into the NHL for the Oilers as prolifically and as efficiently as he has. In the last 2 years, every single minute he's played at the NHL, I have thought he belonged there. Yeah. And I really truly believe that will continue to, he will just continue to get better and better and better. Ryan McLeod must be on the Edmonton Oilers roster next year. I rest my case. Braden, Kyler Yamamoto, closing statements.
Yeah, Kyler, for sure. I think the team is better with him. He proved it on the stat sheet. He proved it on 3 different lines this year. He stayed healthy. He's feisty. He doesn't shy away from battles. He hits. He does everything you want on the ice. And if that can continue to help the Edmonton Oilers win, then that's what you do. You try to keep him. And if they can win by trading him or moving him, then I guess that is also an option because of how valuable he is as a player. To argue your point about coming into the NHL from the minors, I think we're going to see incredible excitement with Dylan Holloway, but that's not who we're talking about.
All right. Thank you. That was very helpful. Elliot, the floor is yours.
Talking about all the wrong things, though. We really need to be talking about the goaltending here soon.
Elliot, the floor is yours.
Ultimately, the truth is...
Jesse Puljujarvi played goal?
Yeah, he can play goal.
Because then there's an argument.
Look, he could potentially play goal because of his best attribute, his size. It's about being big and tough, and he's got all of the physical attributes, the intangibles, the things you can't coach. It's just about getting him to a level, that where his skills at an NHL level, and I think that there's totally the potential to do it. And if we're going to be looking at multiple playoff runs year over year over year, you need someone big and durable, and I think Jesse Puljujarvi is the way to go with that. But
I know it's your closing statements, but I have to ask you a question. Have you ever seen a player, though, as big as that who looks more confused when he meets contact? Yeah. Like someone pushes or shove him, and he literally looks like he thought they were playing tennis.
Yeah. Yakupov was a bit like that too.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway,
I've never seen anyone like lick their brains as much either. His tongue is always up his nose.
Yeah, he's got a long tongue. Thank you, gentlemen. I don't think we've come to any kind of consensus, but the great news is this: none of us
have to.
Have to. That's right. We will wait and see what Ken Holland has in store for the Edmonton Oilers in the off season, and I'm sure we will have plenty more conversations about it. That was our very first and maybe only ever, although it was kind of a fun game. Edition of, what did I call the game? You can only keep one. All right. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Braden. That was Hat Trick. Hat Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dyler Coltman and Braden Dyler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.